The hallways of Blackwood Tower gleamed under the soft glow of nightlights as May swept her mop across the marble floor. Everyone else had gone home hours ago, leaving her alone with just the occasional security guard making rounds. This was how she liked it: peaceful, quiet, and free from the judgmental stares of daytime staff. May had been working as a janitor at the headquarters of Blackwood Industries for nearly 2 years now. The pay wasn't great, but it helped cover her bills and put a little aside each month. Most importantly, the night shift let her take care of her grandfather during the day. Tonight, she was cleaning the executive floor, home to the offices of the company's top brass and, of course, the infamous corner office belonging to Blake Blackwood himself, founder, CEO, and one of the richest men in the country. The employees called him the Ice King behind his back. May had seen him only a handful of times, always from a distance, but his reputation was well known. Cold, demanding, and ruthlessly efficient. Those who failed to meet his standards didn't last long. Some said he fired people just for looking at him the wrong way. As May pushed her cleaning cart past his office, she noticed the door was slightly ajar. That was unusual. Mr. Blackwood's office was typically locked tight, accessible only to his executive assistant and the head of security. She hesitated, then gently pushed the door open wider. She should clean it while she had the chance. After all, that was her job. And skipping the CEO's office would surely get her in trouble if anyone found out. The office was massive, at least 3 times the size of her entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city lights below. A large desk made of dark wood dominated one side of the room, while a seating area with leather couches occupied another. But what caught May's eye was the grand piano in the corner, a beautiful black Steinway that seemed to draw her toward it like a magnet. "I shouldn't," she whispered to herself, but her feet were already carrying her across the room. May hadn't touched a piano in almost a year, not since she'd pawned her old upright to pay for her grandfather's medical bills. Before life had thrown its curveballs, music had been her everything. She'd shown promise from a young age, won competitions, even earned a scholarship to the prestigious National Conservatory. But dreams had a way of slipping through your fingers when reality came knocking. She ran her hand lightly over the polished surface, careful not to leave fingerprints. This piano probably cost more than she would make in 10 years. She lifted the fallboard that covered the keys and sighed at the perfect row of ivory and ebony beneath. Just one quick touch, she thought. No one would know. Her fingers hovered over the keys for a moment before she allowed herself to press one note. The sound resonated through the quiet office, rich and perfectly tuned. She closed her eyes, remembering. Before she realized what she was doing, May had settled onto the bench, her cleaning forgotten. She placed her hands in position, muscle memory taking over as she began to play softly. Just a simple melody at first, one her mother had taught her as a child. The music filled the empty space around her, and for a moment she wasn't a janitor in a billionaire's office. She was just a girl who once had dreams. So lost was she in the music that she didn't hear the office door open wider or notice the tall figure standing in the doorway, watching her with narrowed eyes. "What do you think you're doing?" The harsh voice sliced through the music like a knife. May's hands froze over the keys as her eyes snapped open. Standing just feet away was Blake Blackwood himself, his expression dark with anger. He looked even more intimidating up close, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in an expensive suit despite the late hour. His dark hair was neatly combed back and his jawline could have been carved from stone, but it was his eyes that truly frightened her, cold and gray as winter storm clouds. May jumped to her feet, nearly knocking over the piano bench in her haste. "I'm so sorry, sir. I was cleaning and you were not cleaning. You were touching my personal property without permission." His voice was low but sharp enough to cut. "Do you know how much that piano costs?" May swallowed hard. "I'm very sorry." "It won't happen again." "You're right. It won't." He moved closer, his steps measured and deliberate. "Because you're fired." Her heart sank. She needed this job desperately. "Please, Mr. Blackwood, I made a mistake." "It won't ever happen again, I promise." He studied her for a long moment, his gaze traveling from her worn uniform to her hands, which were trembling slightly at her sides. Something in his expression shifted. "You play," he said. "It wasn't a question. I used to, a long time ago." A strange smile curved his lips, not reaching his eyes. "A janitor who plays the piano. How unexpected." There was something in his tone that made her stand a little straighter, a little more defiant despite her fear. "We all have pasts, Mr. Blackwood." He raised an eyebrow, looking almost amused by her courage. He walked to the desk and leaned against it, crossing his arms over his chest. "Play something," he commanded. "What?" "You heard me. Play something." His eyes held a challenge. "Convince me not to fire you right now." May hesitated. This felt like some cruel game, but she had no choice. She needed this job. Slowly, she sat back down at the piano bench, her mind racing through pieces she knew well enough to play under pressure. As she positioned her hands, Blackwood let out a scoffing laugh. "If you play the piano, really play it, I will marry you," he said sneeringly, clearly believing she would fail. The mockery in his voice lit a spark inside her. Without a word, May began to play. She chose Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor, fierce and demanding, a piece that required both technical skill and emotional depth. Her fingers flew across the keys with precision, born from thousands of hours of practice. Each note was crystal clear, each phrase shaped with intention. The music filled the office, bouncing off the glass windows and surrounding them both. May forgot about Blackwood, forgot about her fear of losing her job, forgot everything except the conversation between her fingers and the piano. This was the language she spoke best, the language of crescendos and diminuendos, of tension and release. As the final chords faded, silence fell over the room. May kept her eyes on the keys, afraid to look up and see the expression on her employer's face. Her heart was pounding, not from fear now, but from the rush that came with playing again, really playing after so long. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Blackwood's voice was different now, quieter, without the edge of contempt. May finally looked up. His face had transformed. The coldness was still there, but now mixed with something else. Surprise, confusion, perhaps even a reluctant admiration. "I studied at the National Conservatory," she said simply. "For a while, and now you clean floors?" The question wasn't sneering this time, just genuinely puzzled. She met his gaze. "Life happens, Mr. Blackwood. We do what we must." For a long moment he simply stared at her, as if seeing her for the first time. The air between them seemed charged with something indefinable. Finally, he straightened from his position against the desk. "What's your name?" "May Lin." "Well, May Lin, it seems I misjudged you." He walked to the window, looking out at the city below. "You're not fired. In fact," he turned back to face her, "I may have a different position for you. I don't need charity, Mr. Blackwood." "Charity?" He looked almost offended. "I never do anything charitable. This is business. Talent like yours shouldn't be wasted on mopping floors. My company hosts events, important events with important people. Having someone play live music would be an asset." May wasn't sure how to respond. Was this real? Or some elaborate way to humiliate her further? "Of course," he continued, "you'd have to prove yourself. I don't make offers like this lightly." "What about your marriage proposal?" she asked, surprising herself with her boldness. For the first time, Blackwood looked genuinely thrown off balance. Then unexpectedly he laughed, a short, sharp sound that seemed rusty from disuse. "Touché, Miss Lin." His eyes glinted with something that might have been respect. "You're brave, I'll give you that." He walked to his desk and wrote something on a business card before handing it to her. "Come to this address tomorrow at 7. We'll discuss terms," he paused, "and bring whatever you'll need to play for an audience." May looked down at the card, then back at the man who just minutes ago had been ready to fire her. "Why are you doing this?" Blackwood's expression was unreadable. "Let's just say I recognize value when I see it, even in unexpected places." He glanced at his watch. "It's late. You should finish your work and go home." The abrupt dismissal was clear. May nodded and moved back to her cleaning cart, still trying to process what had just happened. As she began wiping down surfaces, she could feel his eyes on her. "And Miss Lin," she paused, looking back at him. "That piano hasn't been played in years." Something flickered across his face, a shadow of an old memory, perhaps. It was good to hear it again. With that, he turned away, effectively ending their conversation. May continued her cleaning, her mind swirling with questions and possibilities. Outside the windows of Blackwood Tower, the city lights twinkled like stars fallen to earth. Inside, something had shifted between the billionaire and the janitor. A challenge issued and met, a connection formed in the most unlikely of circumstances. Whatever came next, May knew that her life had just taken an unexpected turn, all because she couldn't resist the pull of piano keys in the quiet of night. May stood outside the address Blake Blackwood had given her, clutching her small bag of sheet music. The building wasn't what she had expected. Instead of another sleek corporate tower, she found herself in front of an upscale restaurant with soft golden lighting visible through the windows. A valet approached her, but she shook her head and stepped back. She couldn't afford to have her 15-year-old hatchback parked by a valet. She checked the address on the card again. This was definitely the place. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped inside. The restaurant was clearly exclusive, the kind of place where people didn't look at prices on the menu. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over tables draped in crisp white linens. A pianist was playing softly in one corner, his fingers moving gracefully over the keys of a small grand piano. May felt painfully out of place in her best outfit, a simple blue dress she'd bought second-hand and carefully mended. She approached the host stand where a man in a tailored suit regarded her with a practiced smile. "I'm here to meet Mr. Blackwood," she said, trying to sound confident. The host's expression changed immediately. "Of course, Mr. Blackwood is expecting you. Please follow me." He led her through the main dining area to a private room at the back. Blake Blackwood sat alone at a table set for two, studying something on his tablet. He looked up as they entered, his gray eyes assessing her with the same intensity she'd seen the night before. "Miss Lynn, you're punctual." He nodded to the host, who quickly disappeared, closing the door behind him. "I try to be," she replied, still standing awkwardly by the door. "Please, sit." He gestured to the chair across from him. As May took her seat, she noticed the piano in the corner of the private dining room. It was smaller than the one in his office, but looked just as expensive. "Have you eaten?" Blackwood asked, setting his tablet aside. "Not yet." Truth was, she'd been too nervous to eat all day. Without another word, he pressed a button on the table. Almost immediately, a waiter appeared with a bottle of wine and the first course, something delicate and beautifully plated that May couldn't identify. "I took the liberty of ordering," Blackwood said. "I hope you don't mind." It wasn't really a question. Everything about him spoke of a man used to having his way, from the precise way he straightened his silverware to how he held her gaze, expecting no argument. "That's fine," she said. Then, because she couldn't help herself, she added, "But I should warn you, I'm not easily impressed by fancy food or expensive wine." The corner of his mouth twitched. "No, and what does impress you, Miss Lynn?" "Kindness," she said simply. "Honesty. People who see others as people, not props or possessions." Something flashed in his eyes, annoyance perhaps, or surprise at her directness. "You don't know me well enough to judge my character." "I'm not judging. Just answering your question." They ate in silence for a few minutes. May had to admit the food was incredible, though she tried not to show how much she was enjoying it. "Tell me," Blackwood said finally, "why did you stop playing? You clearly have talent." May set down her fork. She hadn't expected such a direct question. "Life happened. My mother got sick during my second year at the conservatory. Cancer. I left school to take care of her. And after? After she died, there were medical bills. Then my grandfather needed care. The piano I grew up with was the first thing I sold." She took a sip of water. "Music is a luxury I couldn't afford anymore." Blackwood studied her face as if looking for signs of self-pity, but found none. "That's unfortunate. It's life," she corrected him. "Most people don't have the luxury of pursuing their passions. And yet here you are." May looked at him questioningly. "You could have ignored the piano in my office. You could have just been a janitor. But you couldn't resist playing, could you?" She didn't answer, but they both knew he was right. "Play something," he said, nodding toward the piano in the corner. May hesitated. "What is this about, Mr. Blackwood? What do you really want from me?" He leaned back in his chair, swirling the wine in his glass. "Consider it an audition. I told you my company hosts important events. Having live music performed by someone talented would be an asset. And that's all." His eyes narrowed slightly. "What else would it be?" Me shrugged. "You're not exactly known for your generosity. People talk, you know, even to the cleaning staff." For a moment she thought she'd gone too far. His expression darkened, but then unexpectedly he laughed. It was a genuine laugh this time, not the scoffing sound from the night before. Fair enough, he said. Let's just say I'm curious. You surprised me last night. That doesn't happen often. May considered this, then stood and walked to the piano. She opened her bag and took out a piece of sheet music, placing it on the stand. Then she sat down, adjusted the bench, and began to play. She chose Debussy's Clair de Lune this time, a piece that began softly, delicately, before building to an emotional climax. It was music that told a story without words, that painted pictures in the mind. As she played, she forgot about Blackwood watching her, forgot about the expensive restaurant and her second-hand dress. There was only the music, gentle as moonlight at first, then flowing like water. When she finished, the final notes hung in the air like a question. Mee kept her hands on the keys for a moment before turning to look at Blackwood. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't read, part admiration, part something deeper, more complex. He seemed about to speak when his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowning. "Excuse me," he said, standing abruptly. "I need to take this. Business." He stepped out of the private room, leaving May alone. She remained at the piano, running her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them. What was she doing here? This man could ruin her life on a whim, fire her for any reason or no reason at all. And yet there was something about him that intrigued her. Not his wealth or power, but the glimpses of something else, something hidden beneath the cold exterior. Blackwood returned a few minutes later, his face once again the mask of a businessman. "I apologize for the interruption." "That was well played. Thank you. I have a proposition for you." He returned to his seat and gestured for her to join him. "I'll pay you to play at company events, 3 times your current salary. You can keep your regular job or not, that's up to you." May blinked, surprised by the offer. "Why? Why what?" "Why me? You could hire any professional pianist in the city." Blackwood regarded her for a long moment. "Because you play with feeling. Most professionals I've heard play perfectly but without soul. You have both technique and emotion." He paused. "It's rare." For the first time since they'd met, he seemed genuinely sincere. There was no mockery in his voice, no condescension. "I'll need to think about it," she said finally. His eyebrows rose slightly. "Most people don't need to think when offered triple their salary." "I'm not most people. Clearly." He handed her a folder. "The details are in here. Dates, times, payment terms. Take your time. But not too much time. The first event is next week." May took the folder, her fingertips barely brushing his. She was struck by how normal his hand looked, strong, with neat nails and a few calluses. Somehow she'd expected the hands of a billionaire to look different, softer perhaps. "One more thing," he said, his voice turning businesslike again. "If you accept, you'll need proper attire. I'll have my assistant help you with that." "I can dress myself," May said, bristling slightly. "I'm sure you can, but these events have certain expectations." She wanted to refuse, to tell him she didn't need his charity, but she thought of her grandfather's medication, the leaking roof in their small apartment, the mounting bills. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford right now. "Fine," she said, "but nothing flashy." "Agreed." He stood, signaling the end of their meeting. "I'll expect your answer by Friday." As they walked out together, May noticed heads turning in the main dining room. People were watching them, whispering behind their hands. Blake Blackwood with an unknown Asian woman in a cheap dress, it was clearly gossip-worthy. At the door, he paused. "My driver can take you home." "No, thanks. I have my car." He looked past her to the parking lot where her old hatchback sat between gleaming luxury vehicles. If he was judging her, he didn't show it. "Good night, Miss Lynn." "Good night, Mr. Blackwood." As she drove home, May's mind was racing. The folder on the passenger seat seemed to weigh 100 pounds. She had no doubt the offer was genuine. Blake Blackwood didn't seem like a man who made jokes or empty promises. The question was why? Why her? Why now? And more importantly, what would it cost her in the end? Because one thing she knew for certain, nothing in this world came without a price. May's fingers trembled slightly as she buttoned up the black silk blouse the stylist had selected for her. The fitting had been an uncomfortable experience, a stranger measuring her, examining her as if she were a mannequin rather than a person. But she had to admit the result was stunning. The outfit, a simple yet elegant, black blouse paired with wide-legged pants, made her look like she belonged in the world of wealth and privilege she was about to enter. Tonight was her first performance as Blake Blackwood's company. Pianist. A title that still felt strange on her tongue. She had called him on Thursday, 2 days before his deadline, to accept his offer. His response had been typically businesslike. A simple good choice, followed by instructions to meet with his stylist and attend a briefing about the event. The event was a charity gala for the Blackwood Foundation, held at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel. From what May gathered, it was one of the most prestigious social events of the year, with tickets costing more than a month of her janitor's salary. Her grandfather watched from the doorway of their tiny apartment as she put on the simple pearl earrings that had belonged to her mother, the one piece of jewelry she had refused to sell. "You look beautiful," he said in Mandarin, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Your mother would be proud." May smiled at him in the mirror. "It's just a job, yay, is it?" There was a knowing look in his eyes that made her blush slightly. "Yes," she said firmly. "Mr. Blackwood is my boss, nothing more." Her grandfather simply nodded, but the smile didn't leave his face. "Be careful with men like him, little one. They are used to getting what they want." Before May could respond, a car horn sounded outside. The driver Blackwood had sent was right on time. "I won't be home late," she told her grandfather, kissing his cheek. "Your medicine is on the nightstand, and Mrs. Wu next door will check on you at 8. Go," he shooed her away with a laugh. "I am old, not helpless." The drive to the hotel took nearly an hour in evening traffic. May spent it looking out the window, watching as the familiar neighborhoods of her daily life gave way to the glittering downtown district where she normally only went to. Clean. The Grand Metropolitan was even more imposing than she had imagined. A historic building renovated to maintain its classic architecture while offering every modern luxury. The driver pulled up to the entrance where men in tuxedos and women in evening gowns were arriving, many emerging from limousines even more expensive than the car Blackwood had sent for her. "Miss Lynn," the driver said, opening her door. "Mr. Blackwood asked me to escort you to the ballroom." May followed him through the main lobby, trying not to stare at the massive chandeliers and marble floors. They took a service elevator up to the mezzanine level, where the driver handed her off to a hotel staff member who led her through a back entrance to the grand ballroom. The space was magnificent. High ceilings, ornate moldings, walls lined with artwork that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. At one end stood a beautiful grand piano on a small raised platform. Several people were bustling around, making last-minute adjustments to flower arrangements and place settings. "There you are." May turned to find Blake Blackwood walking toward her. He wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo that made him look even taller and more commanding than usual. His dark hair was combed back, revealing the sharp angles of his face. "Mr. Blackwood," she greeted him with a nod. "Blake," he corrected her. "When we're at these events, call me Blake. Mr. Blackwood makes me sound like my father." Something in his tone when he mentioned his father made her look at him more carefully. There was tension there, a hint of an old wound. "Blake," she repeated, testing the name. It felt strange, too familiar. He looked her over, his expression unreadable. "The outfit suits you." "Thank you," she shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. "Your stylist was very helpful. I wanted to check that you have everything you need before the guests arrive." He gestured toward the piano. "Feel free to familiarize yourself with the instrument. It's a Bösendorfer, one of the best." May's eyes widened. She had only ever played on a Bösendorfer once during a master class at the conservatory. It was considered one of the finest pianos in the world. "Thank you," she said, her voice softer now, genuinely grateful for the opportunity. As she walked to the piano, she felt his eyes following her. When she sat down and placed her fingers on the keys, testing them with a few gentle chords, she heard him inhale sharply. The sound was indeed magnificent, warm and rich with a depth that seemed to fill the entire room. "I'll leave you to prepare," he said. "The event starts in 30 minutes. You'll play as guests arrive, then during dinner. I've put the schedule on the piano." After he left, May spent some time getting to know the instrument, letting her fingers rediscover the joy of playing on a truly exceptional piano. She was so absorbed that she didn't notice the ballroom gradually filling with guests until the buzz of conversation grew loud enough to pull her from her musical trance. Taking a deep breath, she began to play the classical pieces she had selected for the evening: Bach, Mozart, Chopin. Music that would provide a sophisticated backdrop without demanding attention. As she played, she observed the crowd from her slightly elevated position. The guests were exactly what she had expected. Wealthy, powerful people in expensive clothes, air-kissing and making small talk. Blake moved among them with practiced ease, shaking hands, accepting congratulations, introducing people to one another. He was different here, smoother, more charming than the cold, demanding man she had first met in his office. About an hour into the event, during a short break between pieces, May noticed a woman approaching Blake. She was stunning, tall and blonde, wearing a red gown that probably cost more than May would make in a year, even with her new salary. The woman placed a possessive hand on Blake's arm, leaning in to whisper something in his ear. May quickly looked away, focusing on her sheet music. It was none of her business who Blake Blackwood spent time with. She was here to play the piano, nothing more. She began Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, losing herself in the haunting melody. When she looked up again, Blake was standing alone near the bar, watching her. Their eyes met briefly before May looked down at her hands again, feeling a strange flutter in her chest that she refused to acknowledge. During dinner, she played softer pieces, allowing conversation to flow easily over the music. Waiters in formal attire served course after course of exquisitely prepared food, while champagne flowed freely. From her position, May could see Blake at the head table, seated next to the blonde woman and an older man who appeared to be an important guest of honor. As the evening progressed, May began to feel invisible, part of the decor like the flowers or the paintings. No one spoke to her or even seemed to notice her despite the music she was creating. It was both liberating and lonely, this strange position of being present but not participating. During her final scheduled break, she slipped away to find a quiet spot. The hallway outside the ballroom was empty, and she leaned against the wall, closing her eyes for a moment. "You play beautifully." May's eyes snapped open. Blake stood a few feet away, 2 glasses in his hands. He offered one to her. "Just water," he said when she hesitated. She took it gratefully, suddenly aware of how thirsty she was. "Thank you. You've been playing for nearly 3 hours. I thought you might need a break." "I'm fine," she said automatically. "You don't have to always be fine. You know." There was something different in his voice, gentler, without the edge of command it usually carried. May didn't know how to respond to this version of Blake Blackwood. "The guests are impressed," he continued. "Several have asked about you. What did you tell them?" "That you're a talented musician I was fortunate to discover." He took a sip of his drink, scotch from the look of it. "I didn't mention the part about you being my janitor." May frowned slightly. "Ashamed of that?" "No," he said, surprisingly serious. "But I thought you might prefer they didn't know." He was right, of course, but she was surprised by his consideration. "The woman in the red dress," May found herself asking before she could stop herself. "She seems to know you well." Something flashed in his eyes, amusement perhaps. "Victoria? She's the daughter of one of my board members. We dated briefly last year." "I see." May didn't know why she'd asked or why his answer made her feel relieved. "She's not particularly interested in music," Blake added, a hint of a smile playing at his lips, "or much of anything beyond social media and shopping." May couldn't help but smile. "Not your type then?" "No." His eyes held hers for a moment too long. "Not my type at all." The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with something neither of them was ready to name. He was the first to look away. "I should get back," she said, gesturing toward the ballroom. Blake nodded. "1 more hour, then you're done for the night. My driver will take you home." As May returned to the piano, she felt different somehow. The invisible wall between her and the guests seemed thinner now. She began to play with renewed energy, choosing pieces that spoke of deeper emotions, longing, hope, possibility. And if her eyes occasionally found Blake in the crowd, watching her with that unreadable expression, well, that was just coincidence. 3 months had passed since May's first performance, and her life had transformed in ways she never could have imagined. She still worked as a janitor at Blackwood Tower 3 nights a week, refusing to give up the steady income despite Blake's insistence that her pianist's salary was more than enough. "Never put all your eggs in one basket," her grandfather had taught her, and it was a lesson she took to heart. But on the other 4 nights, she played. Sometimes at corporate events, sometimes at private parties for Blake's business associates, and occasionally at Charity galas that made her first performance seem small in comparison. She had become something of a curiosity in Blake's world, the mysterious pianist who appeared at his side at important functions but was never seen otherwise. Tonight was different. Tonight she was attending the opening of a new Blackwood Industries Technology Center, not as the entertainment, but as Blake's guest. The thought made her stomach twist with nerves as she stood outside the gleaming new building, clutching the small handbag that matched her deep green dress, another selection from the stylist, who now seemed to anticipate her preference for elegant simplicity. "You look like you're about to face a firing squad, not attend a party." May turned to find Blake standing behind her, looking amused. In the months they had worked together, she had noticed his expressions becoming more frequent, more genuine, at least when they were alone. "I play at parties," she said. "I don't attend them." "Well, tonight you do," he offered his arm. "Ready?" She hesitated before placing her hand in the crook of his elbow. It felt oddly intimate, this simple touch. "Why did you ask me to come as your guest?" "You usually bring Victoria to these things." Something darkened in his eyes. "Victoria and I have an understanding. She attends events with me when it's convenient for both of us." "That sounds very romantic," May said dryly. Blake actually laughed, the sound still rare enough to surprise her. "Romance isn't exactly a priority in my world. Convenience, compatibility, mutual benefit, those matter more." "That's sad," May said before she could stop herself. He looked at her curiously as they walked toward the entrance. "Is it?" "Not everyone needs fairy tale love, May. Some of us are content with practical arrangements." "There's a difference between fairy tales and genuine connection," she countered. Before he could respond, they reached the doors, where photographers were capturing the arrivals of important guests. Flashes went off as Blake guided May inside, his hand warm against the small of her back. The new technology center was impressive, all glass and steel, with displays showcasing Blackwood Industries' latest innovations. Employees in formal attire mingled with investors and media representatives. May recognized a few faces from previous events, including several who had complimented her playing. Mr. Blackwood, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, approached them, his smile eager. "Congratulations on the center. The neural interface technology is groundbreaking." "Thank you, Peter," Blake said, shaking the man's hand. "Have you met May Lin?" The man looked at May with surprise, as if only just noticing her presence. "I don't believe I've had the pleasure, though I've enjoyed your music at several events." "May is a gifted pianist," Blake said, and something in his tone made May glance at him. There was pride there and something else she couldn't quite name. "She's also one of the sharpest minds I've encountered." Now both May and Peter looked surprised. Blake had never expressed such an opinion to May directly. "How interesting," Peter said, though his tone suggested he found it anything but. "And what is your background, Miss Lin?" "Juilliard. Curtis Institute, perhaps?" "I studied at the National Conservatory for 2 years," May said, leaving out the part about dropping out to care for her dying mother. "But mostly I just play." "May is being modest," Blake interrupted. "She has an instinctive understanding of music that can't be taught. Rather like how some people understand technology or business." The conversation shifted to the center's research focus, and May found herself genuinely interested in the neural interface project Blake described, technology that could help people with mobility issues control prosthetics with their thoughts. As the evening progressed, May observed Blake in his element, commanding, knowledgeable, occasionally even charming. He introduced her to countless people, always with that same note of pride in his voice. It was a side of him she had glimpsed only rarely before. During a moment alone, as they stood by a display showing a 3D model of a neural implant, May found the courage to ask the question that had been bothering her all night. "Why did you really bring me here? And don't say it's because Victoria was busy." Blake was quiet for so long that May thought he might not answer. Then, looking straight ahead rather than at her, he said, "Because I wanted someone here who sees me as a person, not as Blackwood Industries." The simple honesty of his answer caught her off guard. Before she could respond, a voice cut through their moment of connection. "Blake, darling, there you are." Victoria appeared, radiant in a tight silver dress that left little to the imagination. She kissed Blake's cheek, leaving a smear of red lipstick, before turning to May with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You're the pianist, right?" Mia? May, Blake corrected, wiping the lipstick from his cheek with a barely concealed grimace. Right, May. Victoria's gaze swept over her, dismissive. I thought you'd be at the piano tonight. May is here as my guest, Blake said, his voice taking on that edge of command May had come to know well. How unexpected. Victoria's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose slightly. Your father was looking for you, by the way. He's by the main display with the board members. Something in Blake's posture changed, a slight stiffening of his shoulders, a hardening around his eyes. I'll find him later. He seemed quite insistent, Victoria pressed. I said, I'll find him later. The coldness in his voice was so sudden, so complete, that even Victoria stepped back slightly. Fine. I was just delivering the message. She gave May another appraising look before sauntering away. You don't get along with your father, May observed once Victoria was out of earshot. Blake's laugh was harsh, nothing like the genuine one she had heard earlier. That's putting it mildly. You don't have to talk about it, she said quickly. No. He surprised her by touching her arm lightly. Let's get some air. This place is suddenly feeling crowded. They made their way to a balcony overlooking the city. The night was cool, stars barely visible above the glow of city lights. For a long moment they stood in silence, a careful inch of space between them. My father built Blackwood Industries from nothing, Blake finally said, his voice low. He was brilliant, driven, and absolutely ruthless. Nothing mattered except success, not family, not relationships, not ethics. He sounds difficult, May said carefully. Blake's laugh was bitter. Difficult doesn't begin to cover it. When I was 12, my mother left. Couldn't take his control, his coldness anymore. He told me it was my fault, that I had distracted her from supporting his vision. May felt a surge of anger on behalf of the child Blake had been. That's awful. It was a valuable lesson, he said, his voice detached. Never let anyone close enough to disappoint you. Is that why you are the way you are? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Instead of being offended, Blake seemed intrigued. And how am I exactly? May chose her words carefully. Controlled, distant, always the boss, never the friend. She paused. Except sometimes with me, you're different. Their eyes met in the dim light of the balcony, and something electric passed between them. Blake moved slightly closer, the space between them shrinking. Maybe you see something in me that others don't bother to look for, he said quietly. May's heart was pounding so loudly she was sure he could hear it. Or maybe you show me parts of yourself you hide from everyone else. He was close enough now that she could feel the warmth of him, smell the expensive cologne that had become familiar over these months. For one breathless moment she thought he might kiss her. Then the balcony door opened, spilling light and noise into their private bubble. There you are. Son. The man who stepped onto the balcony was older, but unmistakably related to Blake. The same tall build, the same commanding presence. Though his hair was silver and lines carved deep grooves around his mouth. Father. Blake stepped away from May, his mask of cool professionalism sliding instantly back into place. I was just getting some air. The older man's sharp eyes moved to May, assessing and dismissing her in one glance. I need to speak with you about the neural interface announcement, privately. Of course. Blake turned to May, his expression unreadable again. Excuse us for a moment. As they left, May heard the older Blackwood say, Victoria has been looking for you all evening. It's rude to neglect your date. Victoria isn't my date, Blake replied, his voice fading as they moved inside. May remained on the balcony, trying to process what had just happened or almost happened between them. She had spent months telling herself that her growing feelings for Blake were one-sided, foolish, the stuff of cliched stories about poor girls and rich men. But tonight the balcony door opened again, and May turned expecting Blake. Instead, Victoria stood there, her perfect features arranged in a smile that didn't touch her cold eyes. He'll never choose you. You know, she said without preamble. You're a novelty to him. The talented charity case, the girl from the wrong side of the tracks who plays piano. But people like us end up with people like us. It's how the world works. May straightened her spine, refusing to be intimidated. Maybe Blake doesn't want the world to work that way. Victoria laughed, the sound like breaking glass. Oh, honey. Blake Blackwood doesn't have the luxury of choosing what he wants. None of us do at this level. She stepped closer. Enjoy being his pet project while it lasts. Just don't expect anything more. With that, she turned and left, leaving May alone with the city lights and the memory of how close Blake had been. How different things might have been if they'd had just a few more seconds alone. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, elegantly printed on thick cream paper that felt expensive between May's fingers. Blackwood Industries' 30th Anniversary Gala, it read. Black tie required. At the bottom, a handwritten note in Blake's distinctive sharp handwriting. Not as pianist. As my guest, please. It had been 2 weeks since the Technology Center opening, 2 weeks since their almost moment on the balcony, 2 weeks of awkward distance between them. Blake had called only once about a performance at an upcoming corporate event, their conversation stiff and formal. May had begun to think that Victoria was right, that whatever had sparked between them had been extinguished by the reality of their different worlds, and now this invitation. Her grandfather found her sitting at their small kitchen table, staring at the heavy cardstock. Another fancy party? He asked, settling into the chair across from her with a cup of tea. Yes. May traced the embossed letters with her fingertip. The biggest one yet, apparently. You will go? It wasn't really a question. Her grandfather knew her too well. I don't know. She looked up at him, conflicted. It's complicated. His weathered face creased into a knowing smile. The heart often is. I didn't say anything about my heart. You didn't have to. He took a sip of his tea. I see how you look when you talk about this man, and how you look when you don't talk about him. May sighed. It doesn't matter how I feel. We're from different worlds, Ye. Her grandfather set down his cup. When I first came to this country, I worked in a restaurant owned by a wealthy family. Their daughter, your grandmother, was expected to marry a businessman's son, but she chose me instead. May had heard this story many times but never tired of it. They disowned her. For 3 years, he nodded. Then they met you as a baby and decided some things were more important than social standing. This is different, is it? He patted her hand. The heart knows no class or status, little one. Only connection. Later that night, May called the number on the invitation to RSVP. She wasn't sure what she was doing or what might happen, but she knew she needed to see Blake one more time before deciding what this thing between them really was. The night of the gala arrived crisp and clear, stars visible even through the city's light pollution. May wore a deep blue gown, the most expensive piece of clothing she'd ever owned, purchased with her pianist earnings. Her hair was swept up in an elegant knot, her mother's pearl earrings her only jewelry. This time, when Blake's driver arrived, she felt ready. Whatever happened tonight, she would face it with dignity and courage. The gala was being held at the National Art Museum, its grand marble staircase lined with glowing lanterns leading up to the entrance. Celebrities mingled with business moguls and politicians, all gathered to celebrate 3 decades of Blackwood Industries' success. Camera flashes popped as famous faces arrived, reporters calling out questions from behind velvet ropes. May's car pulled up to the entrance, and a uniformed attendant opened her door. She took a deep breath and stepped out, feeling strangely calm despite the crowd. She had just reached the bottom of the stairs when a familiar voice called her name. May. Blake stood halfway down the staircase, watching her. Even from a distance, she could feel the intensity of his gaze. He descended the remaining steps to meet her, looking more handsome than ever in his tuxedo, his dark hair slightly tousled as if he'd been running his hand through it, nervous habit she'd noticed during particularly stressful business calls. You came, he said simply when he reached her. I said I would. You've said a lot of things. There was a hint of a smile on his lips, like how I'm controlled and distant. And sometimes different, she reminded him, returning his almost smile. He offered his arm. Shall we go in? Or would you rather skip the whole thing? Skip your company's 30th anniversary gala? Wouldn't that cause a scandal? Probably. He didn't sound particularly concerned. But I'm finding lately that I care less about what people think. There was something different about him tonight, a loosening of that rigid control he always maintained, a warmth in his eyes that made her heart beat faster. We should go in, she said finally, at least for a little while. The museum's grand hall had been transformed for the occasion. Artwork worth millions lined the walls while elaborate ice sculptures and floral arrangements decorated the center of the room. A chamber orchestra played softly in one corner. Not at the piano where May would normally be, she noted with a mixture of relief and strangeness. As they entered, heads turned. May recognized Blake's father watching them with undisguised disapproval from across the room. Victoria stood nearby, her expression equally sour. But Blake seemed oblivious to their reaction, his focus entirely on May as he guided her through the crowd, introducing her not as my pianist but simply as Maylene. Blake. A silver-haired woman approached them, elegant in a modest black dress. "Aren't you going to introduce me to your friend?" "Of course." Blake's expression softened. "May, this is my Aunt Lillian, my mother's sister." "Aunt Lil, this is Maylene." "The pianist," Lillian said with a warm smile. "I've heard so much about you." "Too much, perhaps." May liked her immediately. "It's nice to meet you." "Blake tells me you studied at the National Conservatory," Lillian continued. "I serve on their board. Such a shame you couldn't complete your studies." May glanced at Blake, surprised that he knew this detail of her past. He'd clearly been paying more attention than she realized. "Life had other plans," May said simply. "Life often does," Lillian agreed. "But sometimes it circles back around." She patted Blake's arm affectionately. This one needed someone to remind him there's more to existence than quarterly reports. "I'm glad he found you." Before May could respond to this startling statement, Blake's father appeared at their side, his expression tight. "Son, the mayor is waiting to speak with you." His gaze slid dismissively over May. "Business matters." "I'm sure you can handle it, Father," Blake said coolly. "You've never hesitated to speak on my behalf before." The older man's eyes narrowed. "This isn't the time for your rebellion. Victoria's father is also asking for you. He's considering increasing his investment. And Victoria comes with it, I assume?" Blake's voice was dangerously soft. "Like a merger bonus?" His father gripped his arm, speaking low. "Don't throw away everything we've built because you're infatuated with your entertainment." May stiffened, the insult landing like a slap. But before she could react, Blake carefully removed his father's hand from his arm. "I'd like you to apologize to May," he said quietly. "I will do no such." "Then I suggest you walk away." Blake interrupted. "Before I announce to our assembled guests that I'm stepping down as CEO, effective immediately." The threat hung in the air between them. May could see the calculation in the older man's eyes as he weighed his son's sincerity. "You would destroy your legacy over this." "This girl? My legacy," Blake said firmly, "will be my own choices, not yours." His father's face hardened. Without another word, he turned and walked away. "I apologize for my father," Blake said, turning back to May. "He's never understood what really matters." "And you do?" she asked softly. Instead of answering, Blake took her hand. "Come with me. There's something I want to show you." He led her through a side door and down a corridor to a smaller gallery that had been closed off for the event. Inside, a single spotlight illuminated a grand piano in the center of the room. "What's this?" May asked, confused. "Something I've been working on." He guided her to the piano bench and sat beside her. "I have a confession to make. I've been taking lessons, piano lessons." She couldn't hide her surprise. Blake nodded, looking almost shy, an expression she'd never seen on him before. "Twice a week for the past month. I'm not very good yet, but..." He positioned his hands on the keys and began to play. It was a simple piece, one that beginning students often learned, but he played it with careful concentration, his brow furrowed slightly with effort. May watched his hands, those capable, confident hands that signed million-dollar contracts and commanded an empire. Now carefully, humbly creating music. When he finished, he looked at her expectantly. "That was surprising," she said honestly. "Good surprising or bad surprising?" "Good," she smiled. "Definitely good." "But why?" Blake took a deep breath. "Because I wanted to understand what moves you, what matters to you." He looked down at the keys. "My whole life I've been taught that success is measured in acquisitions and assets. But when I watch you play, when I see how music transforms you, I realize there are other forms of wealth I've been missing." He turned to face her fully. "These past months, you've shown me a different way to see the world. You've changed me, May, and I don't want to go back to who I was before." May's heart was pounding. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I care about you deeply, completely. And I'm asking if you might feel something for me too, despite all the reasons you shouldn't. May thought about Victoria's words, about her grandfather's story, about the vast differences in their lives. Then she thought about the man sitting beside her, not the billionaire CEO, but the boy whose mother left, the man who noticed how she played with feeling, the student humble enough to learn something new just to understand her better. I do, she said softly, feel something for you, but I won't be a novelty or a rebellion against your father. You could never be just that. Blake reached out to touch her cheek gently. You're the person who reminded me I have a heart. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of the gala continuing without them, speeches being made, glasses clinking, the future of Blackwood Industries being celebrated by people who didn't know that its CEO was currently sitting in a dark gallery, looking at a janitor's daughter like she was the most precious thing in the world. So what happens now? May asked. Blake smiled, a real smile, open and hopeful. Now I believe it's your turn to teach me how to play. And in that quiet room, surrounded by art created by people who dared to see the world differently, May placed her hands over his on the keys and began to show him how to make music.